Did you know that one of the most famous movie scenes ever filmed almost didn't happen because of what people were allowed to say on screen? A Streetcar Named Desire from 1951 is a movie about broken dreams, lost love, and people struggling to survive in a small apartment in New Orleans. It's passionate, powerful, and sometimes really uncomfortable to watch. The film made Marlon Brando a superstar and changed how actors performed forever. But here's the thing. Behind all that raw emotion and drama, there are secrets that will blow your mind. The filmmakers had to fight with movie bosses, actors had to do things they'd never done before, and the whole production was like walking a tightrope. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about A Streetcar Named Desire. Number 20. The play was so controversial. That movie studios didn't want to make it. When Tennessee Williams wrote the play in 1947, it was shocking. People weren't used to seeing that kind of raw emotion and adult themes on stage. It talked about desire, violence, and things that polite society didn't discuss openly. When the play became a massive success on Broadway, Hollywood wanted to make it into a movie. But here's where it gets strange. Movie bosses were terrified. The people who controlled what movies could show, called the Motion Picture Production Code, said that certain words couldn't be spoken and certain behaviors couldn't be shown. The powerful studio heads weren't sure they could adapt the play without removing all the pieces that made it great. So for years, nobody made the film. It wasn't until producer Irene Mayer-Selznick pushed really hard that anyone took the risk. She believed in the story so much that she fought through all the obstacles to make it happen. What seemed impossible on paper became one of cinema's greatest achievements. The movie that almost never existed became unforgettable. Number 19. Marlon Brando wasn't originally supposed to play Stanley Kowalski. When the play opened on stage, Marlon Brando played Stanley, and he made the role legendary. But when it came time to make the movie, there was serious doubt about casting him again. Some people thought his stage performance was too wild and raw for film. Directors worried that his intense method acting might be too much for the camera. Other big-name actors were being considered for the role, including some established movie stars who seemed more polished and traditional. But director Elia Kazan, who also directed the original stage production, believed Marlon was the only choice. He knew that Marlon's real power came from something deep inside him, a kind of animal energy that couldn't be faked. Kazan convinced the studio to cast him, and that one decision changed everything. When people saw Marlon's performance on film, it was like nothing they'd ever witnessed before. He didn't perform like previous actors, he lived the character. The electricity he brought to Stanley Kowalski was so powerful that it influenced how actors trained and performed for decades to come. One decision, one actor, and movie history shifted forever. Number 18. Vivien Leigh's health nearly forced her to leave the film. Vivien Leigh, who played Blanche Dubois, was already a massive star. She'd won an Academy Award for Gone with the Wind, and everyone wanted to work with her. But during filming, something difficult happened. Vivien struggled with her mental health throughout the production. She was deeply sensitive and emotional, and the dark, heavy material of the film took a real toll on her. Some days, she could barely get through scenes because the emotional weight was crushing. The film's dark themes about loss, desperation, and heartbreak weren't just words on a script for her. She felt them in her bones. There were moments when the director and crew worried she wouldn't be able to finish. But Vivien was a professional. She pushed through the darkness and created one of cinema's most heartbreaking performances. What the audience saw on screen was genuine pain and real struggle. Her vulnerability wasn't acting. It was bravery. She suffered to give us art, and that courage shows in every frame. Number 17. The legendary streetcar line was actually built specially for the movie. Most people assume the filmmakers found an actual streetcar in New Orleans and used it for the famous opening scene. That would make sense, right? But that's not what happened at all. The production team built a full-size streetcar from scratch on a Hollywood backlot. They researched what old New Orleans streetcars looked like, studied photographs, and constructed an exact replica. The famous scene where we see the streetcar rolling through the streets was shot right there in Los Angeles, not in New Orleans. The crew even created fake streets and buildings around it to look like the old New Orleans neighborhoods. It's wild because everyone watching the movie feels like they're seeing real New Orleans, but it's all Hollywood magic. The streetcar became such an iconic image that people assumed it was real and historical. But it was a movie set, a beautiful, carefully constructed illusion. That's the power of filmmaking. With skill and creativity, you can make people believe they're seeing real places they've never visited. The streetcar that never existed became one of cinema's most famous symbols. Number 16. Brando wore a ripped undershirt because it fit the character better. Here's something fashion people find really interesting. Marlon Brando's famous white undershirt in the film wasn't just a costume choice. During rehearsals, Marlon realized that Stanley was a working-class guy who sweats, moves roughly, and didn't care about looking perfect. A neat, clean shirt didn't feel right for the character. So Marlon asked the costume designer if they could rip and dirty up some undershirts. The costume team created versions that looked worn and torn. When Brando wore that ripped undershirt in scenes, something magical happened. The torn fabric made him look more dangerous, more real, and more honest. It was such a small detail, but it changed how audiences felt about the character. Suddenly, Stanley wasn't just a man yelling at his wife, he was a struggling, hard-working guy pushed to his limits. That ripped undershirt became iconic. People copied it. Fashion people studied it. A piece of torn fabric became a symbol of raw, working-class masculinity. Marlon understood that sometimes the smallest details tell the biggest stories. One torn shirt changed how people dressed and how they thought about male characters on screen. Number 15. The famous Stella. Scene was improvised and shocked. Everyone you know that scene where Stanley yells, "Stella, Stella," up the stairs in desperate passion? That scene is burned into movie history. It's one of the most quoted and parodied moments in cinema. But here's the strange truth. It wasn't entirely scripted the way Marlon performed it. While the scene was written, Marlon added his own intensity and desperation. He threw himself into it with such raw emotion that it shocked the crew. When the cameras stopped rolling, people stood silently. Nobody expected it to be that real, that powerful, that animal-like. The intensity came from Marlon accessing something genuinely desperate inside himself. It wasn't just acting, it was unleashing something real. Other actors watched with their mouths open. Even Elia Kazan, the director who'd worked with Marlon before, seemed surprised by the depth of emotion. That scene became the most famous moment in the entire film. It's been imitated in cartoons, sitcoms, and comedy sketches thousands of times. But nothing matches the original because nothing matched the truth in Marlon's voice. He didn't perform that moment. He lived it. What looked scripted was actually the furthest thing from fake. Number 14. The dialogue had to be changed because the censors wouldn't allow certain words. The motion picture production code was incredibly strict in 1951. Certain words weren't allowed. Certain ideas couldn't be shown. Certain behaviors couldn't happen on screen. The original play had language and situations that the censors said were immoral, so the screenwriter had to get creative. Words were removed or changed to slip past the censors. References to certain situations became vague and mysterious. Physical actions had to be implied rather than shown. This created a strange tension in the film. The audience could feel that something deeper and darker was happening, but it was hidden behind careful language and shadowy scenes. Sometimes what you don't see is scarier than what you do. The limitations actually made the film more powerful in some ways. The forbidden quality of the dialogue made it feel dangerous. The hidden actions made people's imaginations work over time. The censors thought they were protecting people, but they accidentally created a film that felt more intense because of what wasn't said or shown. It's like trying to hold water. The more you squeeze, the more it wants to escape. The censorship gave the film an edge it might not have had otherwise. Number 13. Vivien Leigh and Marlon Brando had a real conflict that made their scenes more powerful. Vivien and Marlon came from different acting traditions. Vivien was trained in classical British theatre. She studied technique, controlled her emotions, and performed with precision. Marlon was new to film and came from American method acting. He believed in living the character and unleashing raw emotion. These two approaches clashed constantly. On set, they didn't always understand each other's methods. Sometimes Vivien thought Marlon was too wild. Sometimes Marlon thought Vivien was too controlled. But here's the amazing part. Their conflict actually made their scenes together more powerful. The tension between them was real. The misunderstanding between their characters mirrored the real misunderstanding between the actors. When they performed together, that genuine friction came through on film. The audience felt authentic conflict because the conflict was partially real. Their scenes together crackle with tension because of their different approaches colliding. Two actors with completely different methods created something unforgettable by not understanding each other. What could have been a disaster became genius. The movie's power came partly from the actors genuinely struggling to connect, just like their characters did. Number 12. The bathtub scene was so intimate that it made everyone uncomfortable. There's a scene where Blanche takes a bath while Stanley and his friends play cards nearby. It's a quiet moment that reveals her character. But here's what's wild. Filming that scene was awkward for everyone involved. Vivien had to bathe while cameras rolled nearby. The crew had to film a woman in the bathtub, which wasn't common in 1951 cinema. Everyone felt uncomfortable. Nobody knew exactly how to approach it with respect and professionalism. The director, camera operator, and crew had to carefully figure out how to film it without making Vivien feel exposed or disrespected. They used careful lighting, strategic camera angles, and covered parts of the set to give her privacy. But even with all these precautions, it was tender and unusual. The vulnerability of that scene is real because the filming process itself required real vulnerability. Vivien trusted everyone around her to protect her while she performed something intimate. The final scene on film shows genuine comfort being built between actress and crew. It's one of the most beautiful scenes in the movie because it came from trust and mutual respect. Sometimes the most powerful moments come when everyone involved chooses compassion and professionalism. Number 11. The film was entirely shot on a studio backlot in Hollywood. Here's something that surprises most people. The film wasn't shot in New Orleans at all. Not a single frame was filmed in the actual location where the story takes place. The entire movie was created on backlots and soundstages in Hollywood, California. The production team built sets that looked like New Orleans apartments, streets, and neighborhoods. They researched and replicated the architecture, the lighting, the feeling of the place. But it was all fake, carefully constructed illusions created by craftspeople and artists. Think about that for a moment. Everything that feels so real, so specific to New Orleans, was built by hand in Los Angeles. The crew created an entire world from imagination and research. It's amazing to think that you can transport people to a place without actually going there. The filmmakers understood that truth isn't about location, it's about emotion and character. They built a world that felt true even if it wasn't geographically real. This is one of the greatest secrets of classical Hollywood filmmaking. The most authentic feelings came from constructed sets and controlled environments, Real magic doesn't always require real places. Number 10. Marlon Brando method. Acted so intensely that he actually scared his co-stars. Method acting was still relatively new in 1951. Most actors didn't understand it. Marlon's approach was revolutionary. He didn't just perform scenes, he lived them. During particularly intense moments, Marlon would stay in character between takes. He would remain Stanley even when the cameras stopped rolling. He'd grunt and move like Stanley. He'd stay in that headspace. Some actors on set didn't understand this approach. They'd finish a scene and expect him to relax and chat, but Marlon would stay intense and dangerous. Other cast members found this unsettling. They weren't used to working with someone so committed to living a character. There were moments when Marlon's intensity seemed threatening. When he grabbed or moved close to other actors, they couldn't tell if it was performance or something real. That fear and uncertainty actually made the scenes more authentic. The other actors weren't just acting scared, they actually felt unsafe sometimes. That genuine tension transferred to the film. What looked like powerful acting was partly real adrenaline and real discomfort. Marlon's intensity wasn't just a technique, it was a commitment that made everyone around him feel the weight of his character's emotions. Number 9. The famous Kowalski scene where Stella runs down the stairs was shot multiple times. That iconic moment where Stella runs downstairs toward Stanley has been replayed and parodied millions of times. But getting it right took multiple attempts. Director Elia Kazan shot the scene several times because he wanted the exact right emotion and timing. Vivien had to run down those stairs with perfect balance and passion. The camera had to catch her movement precisely. The lighting had to show her face and body clearly. Stanley had to be positioned exactly right. All these technical elements had to come together perfectly, while the actors performed with genuine emotion. It took many takes to get it right. With each attempt, Vivien had to summon that same desperate emotion. Marlon had to stay ready to catch her with the right intensity. The crew had to be positioned perfectly. By the final successful take, both actors were exhausted emotionally. But that exhaustion made the final take even more powerful. The audience was watching actors who'd already poured their hearts out multiple times, digging deep one more time for perfection. The famous scene that feels like pure instinct was actually carefully constructed through repetition and precision. What looked spontaneous was actually crafted with patience and professionalism. Number 8. The costume designer created multiple versions of Blanche's dresses to show her emotional decline. Blanche starts the film wearing nice clothes. She's dressed carefully and looks put together. But as the film progresses and her mental state deteriorates, her appearance changes. The costume designer deliberately created versions of Blanche's dresses that became more worn and disheveled. Early dresses were crisp and clean. Later dresses had wrinkles and damage. By the end of the film, her clothing looked tired and broken, just like her spirit. This wasn't accidental, it was intentional storytelling through costume. The costume designer understood that visual details tell stories. Your clothes say something about your mental state. When you're falling apart emotionally, your appearance often shows it. By changing Blanche's dresses as her character deteriorated, the costume designer gave the audience a visual representation of her collapse. We didn't need dialogue to understand her decline. Her clothing showed it. This is costume design at its finest. It's not just making actors look good. It's using clothes as a character development tool. The progression of Blanche's dresses is a silent story of emotional breakdown. What the dialogue couldn't fully express, the costumes revealed visually. Number 7. The film had to fight the Catholic League and other moral guardians. In 1951, powerful religious groups had significant influence over what movies could be shown. The Catholic League was especially vocal about films they considered immoral. When they saw A Streetcar Named Desire, they were deeply concerned. They thought the film was immoral because of its treatment of adult themes. They organized campaigns against it. Some theaters pulled the film because of pressure from religious groups. Some people were told by their churches not to see the movie. What's crazy is that the film had already been heavily edited and changed by the censors. Even after removing language and hiding actions, it still offended moral guardians. They believed the very story itself about desire, violence, and human weakness was wrong to tell. The filmmakers had to defend their work publicly. They argued that art should be allowed to explore difficult human truths. They fought for the right to tell stories about real people with real problems. This conflict between artists and moral guardians continued for years. But ultimately, the film survived and became respected as a masterpiece. Sometimes the work that offends people most becomes the work that changes people's minds. The movie that was fought against became the movie that forced society to grow up. Number 6. The sound designer used rain sounds to create atmosphere. Even when it wasn't raining in scenes, the film has a heavy, humid, tropical feeling throughout. Part of that comes from the story and acting, but part of it comes from sound design. The sound designer added layers of ambient sounds, rain, humidity, distant traffic, neighborhood noise. Often when you're watching a scene with dialogue, you can hear rain or storm sounds in the background. But if you look closely at the visuals, it's not actually raining. The sound designer created these audio layers to make the environment feel wet, tropical, and oppressive. The sound design made the small apartment feel like it's in the middle of a humid Louisiana summer, surrounded by weather and nature. This was brilliant because sound affects emotion more than people realize. When you hear rain, even if you don't see it, you feel trapped and uncomfortable. The humid, wet sounds made audiences feel the claustrophobia that Blanche feels. The sound design did emotional work that dialogue couldn't do alone. The sound designer understood that a movie isn't just pictures, it's an entire sensory experience. By layering sound strategically, they created an atmosphere that trapped the audience in the same uncomfortable space as the characters. What you heard shaped how you felt more than you probably realized. Number 5. Marlon Brando's mumbling and naturalistic speech changed how actors performed. Forever before Marlon, movie actors spoke clearly and precisely. They enunciated, they performed dialogue, but Marlon mumbled. He slurred words sometimes. He spoke naturally, the way real people actually speak, with pauses, interruptions, and unclear moments. Older actors and studio bosses hated this. They thought he was ruining cinema. They said audiences wouldn't understand him, but audiences actually understood him perfectly. More importantly, they recognized him as real. His naturalistic speech made Stanley feel like a real person, not a character performing. It was shocking and revolutionary. After Marlon's performance, young actors began imitating his approach. They realized that natural speech was more powerful than perfect diction. The way Marlon spoke on film gave permission for other actors to be real instead of theatrical. This single performance changed acting technique across American cinema. What seemed wrong to old Hollywood became the standard for modern acting. Sometimes the person who breaks the rules changes everything. Marlon didn't follow the rules of how actors were supposed to sound, and that rebellion made every actor who came after him freer to be authentic. One mumble, one rejected rule, and cinema became more true. Number 4. The film's ending was different from the play. Because censors demanded changes. In the original play, the ending is ambiguous and dark. Blanche's fate is uncertain, and the story sits in moral gray territory. The ending is heartbreaking and offers no easy answers or comfort. But the censors and studio executives wanted a different ending, something that felt more morally clear. They wanted punishment for bad behavior and some sense of justice. So the filmed version changed the ending to be darker for Blanche and more definitively tragic. The altered ending shows clearer consequences. Whether this change was right or wrong is something people still debate. Some argue the changed ending is actually more powerful because it shows real consequences. Others argue the original play's ambiguous ending was more artistically true. What's interesting is that the film's ending is what people know and remember. Most people don't realize it was altered from the play. The filmed version became the definitive version in people's minds. Art exists in versions and variations. The story we remember isn't always the original story. Sometimes the altered version becomes more famous and powerful than what came before. Sometimes compromise creates something unexpectedly strong. Number 3. Elia Kazan's direction created a masterpiece by letting the actors struggle. Elia Kazan was a brilliant director who understood actors deeply. He'd worked with Marlon on stage, so he knew how to work with him on film. But Kazan's approach was interesting. He sometimes let actors struggle and fight. He didn't always make things comfortable. He'd push them into emotional corners and let them find their way out. This created tension and authenticity. For Vivien, he understood her sensitivity and allowed space for her vulnerability. For Marlon, he challenged him and pushed him toward greater intensity. For the other cast members, he created an environment where their discomfort became their authenticity. Kazan believed that the best performances came from actors being pushed beyond their comfort zones. This isn't cruel, it's demanding excellence. He trusted his actors enough to know they'd transform the pressure into powerful performances. The result is a film that feels raw and alive because the actors genuinely struggled. Their struggle is visible on screen. What looks like natural chaos was actually directed to create that feeling. Kazan orchestrated the entire production like a conductor leading an orchestra, sometimes harmonious, sometimes clashing, always powerful. His direction gave the film its legendary status. Number 2. The production took an unusually long time. Because of the emotional intensity, most films shot in that era were completed relatively quickly. Studios wanted efficiency and speed. But A Streetcar Named Desire took longer than expected because of the emotional demands. Actors needed recovery time between intense scenes. The crew needed time to reset after emotionally draining takes. Director Kazan wouldn't rush performances he knew weren't right. The studio wanted to move faster, but Kazan insisted on taking the time necessary to get truthful performances. Every extra day cost money, but Kazan argued that rushing would damage the film's power. He was right. The slower pace allowed deeper exploration of character and emotion. What seemed like inefficiency was actually dedication to quality. By today's standards, the filming schedule seems normal. But for 1951, it was unusually slow and expensive. The studio trusted Kazan's vision enough to let him take extra time. That trust created a masterpiece. Sometimes the slowest path creates the strongest result. The extra days spent struggling toward truth became the foundation of cinema history. Number 1. The film launched Marlon Brando into superstardom and made method acting mainstream. Before A Streetcar Named Desire, Marlon Brando was talented but not yet famous. After this film, he became one of the most important actors of his generation. His performance was so powerful, so different, so real, that it changed what audiences expected from acting. Young people wanted to be like Marlon. They copied his speech. They imitated his style. They went to acting school wanting to learn his method. Suddenly, method acting wasn't just an interesting technique. It became the gold standard. The entire film industry shifted because of one performance. Casting directors started looking for Marlon-type actors. Young men wanted to act like him. Within a few years, the way movies were made and the way actors performed had fundamentally changed. It's almost impossible to overstate Marlon's influence. He didn't just give a great performance, he changed cinema itself. The film that almost didn't get made became the film that changed everything. One actor, one character, one powerful decision to be truly authentic, and the entire art form evolved. The ripples of that performance continued for decades. Marlon Brando wasn't just playing a character, he was remaking movie acting in real time. Bonus fact: The Secret, about how they coached Vivien through her mental struggles during filming. Here's something few people know about the production's humanity. During filming, Vivien struggled with her mental health. The dark material affected her deeply. The emotional demands pushed her toward places that were genuinely painful. Director Kazan noticed this and made a decision that was unusual for the time. Instead of just pushing harder, he arranged for Vivien to have support between takes. He brought in people who could help her navigate the emotional weight. He made sure she had recovery time. He checked in with her personally. He created an environment where struggling was allowed and supported. This might seem like basic human kindness, but it was actually revolutionary for a Hollywood production. Most directors would have pushed for results without considering the actor's well-being. But Kazan understood that creating authentic emotion required taking care of the person creating it. He gave Vivien space to be vulnerable and broken, then helped her rebuild between takes. This compassionate approach enabled her to create a masterpiece performance. The beauty of the film comes partly from Kazan's decision to support his actors through the darkness. The art was created in an environment of care and respect. One director's choice to see his actors as human beings first, performers second, made all the difference. That's the secret nobody talks about. The greatest art sometimes comes from treating artists with genuine humanity. The past lived again through art created with compassion. A Streetcar Named Desire tells us something true about human nature. It shows us that people break under pressure. It shows us that desire can be dangerous. It shows us that sometimes our past haunts us, no matter how hard we try to escape. The film doesn't offer easy answers or happy endings. It offers truth. And sometimes truth is more powerful than comfort. Marlon Brando, Vivien Leigh, and everyone involved in creating this film gave us something precious. They showed us the complicated, messy, real side of being human. They fought with censors. They struggled with each other. They pushed beyond what was expected. They created art that still matters today, more than 70 years later. The film reminds us that art comes from vulnerability. Great performances come from people brave enough to be broken on camera. Great stories come from artists willing to explore difficult truths. Every detail matters, from torn undershirts to rain sounds in empty air. Every choice has power. Every performance is a gift. If you enjoyed these weird and amazing facts about A Streetcar Named Desire, please subscribe for more. Every movie hides secrets. Every film contains a story behind the story. We'll keep uncovering these hidden truths together, one story at a time. Thank you for sitting with me by this campfire of cinema history.